Welcome to the Marketing on the Move podcast, hosted by The Breezy Company, your go-to resource to master your marketing while juggling all of the demands of being a business owner. We understand that your time is a limited resource and marketing might be the last thing on your priority list right now. Our mission is to provide you with tangible insights and actionable tactics into the latest marketing trends, best practices, and strategies that you can implement no matter how busy you are. Each episode is designed to offer practical advice on leveraging your unique business strengths and efficiently managing your marketing strategy. Whether you're tuning in during your morning commute, between meetings, or while on the run, Marketing on the Move is here to empower you with the knowledge and tools you need to excel in marketing, even when your schedule is packed. Join us for a journey into making the most of your marketing efforts, no matter how busy you are. Welcome back to another episode of Marketing on the Move. We're really excited to have a special guest with us today, Brian Lang. He is the founder and CEO of Upside CFO, a fractional CFO company. We're going to talk about his origin story, his founder story, his journey as a business owner and entrepreneur, as well as some great tips for you if you're in that space and want to better manage your finances as a business owner and an entrepreneur as well. Thanks so much for being here, Brian.
Yep, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Go ahead and just give us a little bit of that story, how you started Upside CFO. This is not your first entrepreneurial venture. You have a long history in real estate investment and other things. So tell us a little bit about that and kind of how you got here.
Yeah, I think origin story of, I wish there was a better answer than this, but of starting a company was I had a cousin who was 12 years older than me and kind of on the outside looking in. It's like, man, that's a good life. It seems like he makes a lot of money, dicks around a lot, played a lot of golf. And, he was definitely working and grinding. You just didn't always see that on the outside. So I was like mesmerized by that. I'm not really meant to be a big corporate human being. And, my skill set's accounting, finance, tax, all that fun stuff. So it kind of made sense to get started in here. And when I was looking at what I could really start, I just felt like this was a good market. I always call it like the Bermuda Triangle of financial advice. Usually what we see in our world, it's like you have a CPA who's only compliance during tax time. Then there's a bookkeeper or sometimes kind of a CFO, and they're really not helping the owner use numbers to drive strategy. And then we have the random financial advisor. I've talked to two of ours ever. Financial advisors can be great, right? And they can also live in their own little silo. So I just felt like there's this huge world out there where there's all these siloed providers. And I have a deep skill set in each area, but I'm kind of like a broad individual. So I just felt like there was a big gap. So I thought I'd dip my toe in the water, and here we are.
You've really niched down to a very specific customer persona that you try to hit, and you call that the working wealthy. And just for context, that's somebody who makes $750,000 to about $5 million a year typically. So very wealthy, high earner, but they're still working. They're not, just have passive income or retired, etc. How did you kind of find that niche that you wanted to work with? And how did you determine that would be a good persona to go after?
Yeah, I think trial and error, accident to a certain extent is how we found them. Ultimately, 750 is not as much, but when you hear the $2, $3, $4 million a year, you just assume like, damn, these people got their shit together. They're making good income. Yeah. Life is easy. And when you peel back the curtain, it's often not like that. Obviously the exterior image shows well, right? On social and all of that stuff, or being the leader, no one wants to get vulnerable. But oftentimes those people are no different than someone who just started their business that's making $300K a year. And actually a lot of times they have more zeros and more chaos. And if they didn't fix that chaos early on, all they did was, quite frankly, scale that chaos. Instead of being $1 million in top line revenue, they're $8 million in top line revenue and happen to bring home $2 million a year. So you see that all the time. They have, no operating systems, still no financial clarity. They're not any smarter or at that high income level than they were 10 or 15 years ago. They never spend the time to learn it. They still don't have tax strategy. They're tipping the IRS, 50K, 250K, 300K a year, big numbers that are just getting stolen from their net worth, in my opinion. So ultimately, once we got more and more familiar with that avatar, those gaps were consistent and they hadn't built that financial foundation. And ultimately, it's a systems issue, to be honest. So we kind of doubled down on that group and seems to be working pretty well so far.
What are some of the most common issues or gaps that you see for those individuals? Like, are there any kind of maybe top 3 things that you can go in and pretty well expect that those are 3 problems that they have going on?
Yes. I mean, I can guarantee you there's tax leaks automatically. We were close the other day, so I'm still allowed to make this statement. Every person I have done a tax plan for who makes $1 million or more, we have always found at least $100,000 in annual tax savings. Every person so far. And, some of them have been, like we did a dude last year, usually pretty good at figuring out someone's income very quickly on a call. And he was being tight-lipped. And I was like, he's going to be higher than I think. We got talking, right? And long story short, I think he was 38 million in top line revenue. And kind of, I was like, so that means you're making at least 20%. So I was like, your take home 7.5. And he was like, higher. So, someone like him, I can't remember what the exact number was, but it was something, and some of this is how comfortable are you with strategy? Does it, or risk? Does this stuff make sense? Yes or no? But we could have gotten him to, I think, as high as 600,000 or 700,000 a year in savings. So wow. Tax savings is like always see it. I feel like another one is, I feel like, and this is working well. These people are making good money, right? They are almost worse from financial strategy. And what I mean by that is they have no plan of what to save, reinvest, distribute. They have lots of zeros that hide that. It's one of those, like, when you're well off, you get pitched a lot, right? Hey, we have a private placement memorandum. Let's put, we're building this commercial building down here. We need to raise 50 million bucks for it. We're taking money, minimum buy-in 75. Sometimes it's just on a whim, like, oh yeah, this sounds good. I got some extra cash. Here's 150. It's like no discipline or rhyme or reason. And sometimes they hit and sometimes they don't. But the overall, if they're really looking themselves in the mirror, they don't have financial strategy if they're being honest with themselves. They just have a lot of zeros to mask it. And then you also see, like still same stuff as smaller business owners, right? Like lack of clarity. What's my real profit? Where the hell is all my cash going? My profit says this, but my bank account says this. Like, where's the disconnect? And then some of our avatars in that, those are the 3 main ones. And then one other one I see that's interesting is some of our avatars, they're making their money work for them. I know plenty of people who make $2 or $3 million a year and they still don't have hardly any cash. It's always just out in investments. And it's one thing to do that when you're a little younger. I won't say too much so I don't dispel my client here or share too much. But, we have one pretty high net worth client. And I mean, they've had just a shit show the last 18 months that we've been piecing together and how to get out of this. We're getting close, but basically, like, we're going to survive 25, get rid of some stuff, and then, shrink the empire down. And like I said, he's one of our higher net worth clients. Then we're going to have to build it back out. He's one of those serial entrepreneur and just deal after deal after deal. And we had some bad timing and some bad luck on those deals. So, lots of cash flow anxiety and frustration for pretty much a 3-year period now.
When you're dealing with, and you deal with very high earners, like obviously from this whole conversation, you deal with people who have, a lot to gain, a lot to lose. So when they trust you with their financial strategy, their money, how they're going to spend it, how they're going to go about using it, there has to be a lot of trust built with you. You have to really come across as a really credible person, know what they're talking about for them to trust you. You've done a really good job of that with your personal brand. And, you have a company and you have a team, but you as the founder and being really out front. Can you talk a little bit about how you've gone about that, kind of how that's evolved, how you're doing that now to keep building that trust with potential clients?
Yeah. And actually, I've never really thought of how I just see it all the time, right? So I don't think anything of it. But it's a huge factor. Obviously, we take it very seriously, but it's just so ingrained in our process, But I think one of the reasons I'm able to garner that trust is just I'm real. Don't make money weird. I've never understood this. I can get on a soapbox and give you guys like a 30-minute podcast just on this topic of how we make money so goddamn weird as a society and like something taboo, even though it should be freely talked about, learned, taught in schools, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that's one of the ways I've kind of built that trust. And, we are starting to get some people just reaching out from Post, right? So I assume that's just they've seen my mindset, right? Like how I think about money, just ultimately like who I am as a person, my beliefs, tax, finance, accounting, like it's all kind of married. And it's a lot of the stuff is just, you have to get a little bit better at it, each year, 1% better, right? And I try to be real and not sugarcoat it, where I think a lot of advisors, like I said, it's money. People are weird about it. And ultimately, sometimes I say shit people don't want to hear, right? Like, you are ultimately responsible for your money, period, end of story. Like, right. I can care about your money a lot. I can never care about it as much as you do. It's impossible to. And, I think a lot of people don't acknowledge that. It's no different. With my background, if I don't know about marketing as an entrepreneur, I have to learn about it at least to a certain extent. So I have the skill set to find the right people. I feel like people avoid that around money a lot. And those are things I talk about. I also talk about, which, guys, I'll be honest on how much I want to poke the bear here, but I do talk shit on CPAs sometimes. And man, does that ever explode and piss people off. I'm not used to much of a social media presence. I've avoided it my whole life. I think it's the downfall of society. But it's amazing when you just say some stuff that could be gaps in the professional service space. And it's funny because I have a ton of certifications. I don't put any of that stupid shit on my signature. Everyone, master's financial, I have all those certificates. I'm a CPA, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't put any of that stuff out there. So then it's interesting when you get attacked, if you talk about how people aren't, doing what they should do from a tax planning perspective. You have those 3-letter accredited folks who just assume you're stupid because you don't have the 3 letters attached to your signature. So they attack you. Then you also get the people with the flex of experience. And it's like, I'm still learning a ton, right? I'm 43. It's like, I have worked 20 years now. Do I know everything? Absolutely not. And I still have a huge learning curve and stuff I got to learn about. But you get the older people who get the experience high horse. So it's just very interesting when you challenge the status quo, if you will.
Yes.
And I think that's, I'm not absurd about it. I post about it every once in a while, and it's all real post. I'm not posting to try to get engagement or become that person. But I think that's another reason why that trust has been able to be built.
There's a real value in being critical of your own industry, because people outside your industry, that I think does lead to trust and credibility, because they've probably had negative experiences with CPAs or accountants who did things in a certain way that weren't strategic. And one thing I really learned a lot as a business owner myself working with you is knowing your own numbers. I'm definitely one of those people who shied away from that. I definitely was, the person was like, well, I have a bookkeeper, I have this person, I have that person. They handle this stuff. And I really learned how I was choosing ignorance, and that was really a downfall. And so we actually I made it a big goal the past 6 to 8 months to change that from my position as the CEO of our company. And it's really opened my eyes to a lot of stuff. So I have a lot of numbers conversations now. I'm talking with, our team constantly about this, but it's also allowed us to have better goal setting. We are using our money in different ways now. It's being distributed differently. Our budget looks different, all these different things. And yes, we still had, a bookkeeper, we have a CPA, we have all these things, but there's nothing like actually understanding these things yourself. And so yes, you need a trusted partner to help you through it, but you kind of have to know a little bit of it yourself for you to actually see the results that you want to from those efforts.
Yeah, you for sure have to. And I mean, ultimately, like I said, the buck stops with you. If the current group can't get you where your understanding is solid enough, that's on you. Go find a new group.
Yeah.
Or
right.
If you're someone who's just like, whatever reason, right? Like, damn, this is hard for me. I hate numbers. Go take online training somewhere. Like you
Yeah.
gotta know some of it. Period. End of
Yeah.
story. And I mean, I feel like we learn more and more about our numbers every year.
Yeah.
We're being a lot more intentional around priorities and like weekly scorecards at the company. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, and you have to balance like what is too many numbers to look at versus the right amount.
Right. Yeah.
But I feel like we look at more and more stuff, and it's really not that hard to pull this stuff. And I mean, I
Yeah.
had a tangent for a second, but if we're being honest, and I'm including myself in this, I think business owners tolerate so much bullshit, it is absurd. And if we really think about how we're running our company, we are not running them well. And I mean, there's just straight avoidance around numbers a lot of times, or, all sorts of stuff, right? Like, this person is not the right person. I need to let him go. Let him go then, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's amazing if you really think of what small business owners tolerate. Like, big corporate would never put up with some of that stuff.
Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. So you kind of have spoken of this already a little bit, but there is a sea of CPAs and accountants and all kinds of people out there. How do you feel like, and this doesn't have to be like a final answer, like this is how we're doing it, how we're always going to do it, but how you guys have been able to differentiate yourselves in the market so far, and ways you want to continue to do that from a marketing perspective, from like actually being in the market and being able to appeal to your ideal customer.
Yeah, and I haven't really thought much on how we differentiate. I'm just, personally for me, I'm very much not a typical CPA avatar, right? Like if you look at my personality profile, I'm nothing like a CPA on that. Just happen to be one and like numbers. So that's an obvious differentiator right away. And then the other gaps, I'm just going to pick on all my accountants out there, including people on my team too. We like internally at our team, I'm really think like business owners, not like accountants. I don't know how many times I'm going to say that until I'm dead, probably a lot. And I think that's just something very challenging for accountants, CPAs, whatever you want to call everyone out there. And I can think back like before I got super ingrained in tax, and I still outsource my tax stuff to people, but when I wasn't as skilled, you get the, how do I say money on tax? No one really helps you with that answer for the most part. 9 out of 10 firms or 9.9 out of 10 firms aren't good at that. And then when they do give you something, it's like, what would you do? No one ever wants to give that advice for some reason, and then it's always disclaimed like, well, I don't know. I'm not fine. I'm not a business owner, right? You can marry that conversation and have some common sense stuff, like you, Savannah, as a business owner should rely on us as a guide who get the benefit of seeing 50 or 200 versions of you. So we do have a little more outside experience and know what has worked, what hasn't. Like,
because I don't know what I don't know, but you probably do, and I'm in my little siloed bubble, and you're not.
Yep. And then, a lot of times as a business owner, you have the challenge, whatever your scaling parts are. I talk about this a lot. Valleys of death, 1 million, 2.5, 5 million, 10 million. You have all these natural valleys of death. It depends what industry you're in and all that stuff and where the exact points are. But let's just say professional services, for example. 2.5 to 5 million is extremely hard in professional services because you're ultimately getting where, no disrespect to anyone who's gotten to million or who hasn't, you can get to 1 million in revenue in professional services off determination. Period. End of story. And then 2.5 is the next major milestone. And when you're getting in that 2.5 to 5 million range, like you can't get there off grit and determination anymore. You have to have systems in place. You have to have marketing in place. You have to have other leaders in place. You have to know how to lead your other leaders at the company. So that's something, I just see people struggle with all the time there. And CPAs, they've seen a lot of that, and they can kind of guide you where, a lot of times in those valleys of death, the things the business owners are struggling with, it's like, hey, I know my profit's going down, because sometimes you got to spend your money to scale, right? Sure. You can be a sounding board there. Like, hey, man, we've noticed your overhead has gone up to here. And, business owner would be like, yeah, I'm aware. I'm trying to do X, Y, Z, right? And then the hope is, we're building it before the work is there. It's always the chicken or egg. Do you hire the people or do you let the work come in, right? So, like, have those candid and real conversations And then you, the CPAs, accountants, people that I do, we're the guardrails out there to help you guys watch that and kind of point out like, hey, I think you're going too far in one direction. Or it could be the opposite. Like, you guys have a shit ton of cash. Like, a business is not allowed just to stay in the same spot. It is a living organism. It is either growing or dying. Like, there is no, hey, I've gotten to this point, I don't want to be any bigger than I am. Like, it's always adjusting and moving. So you can have the same thing on the other side where it's like, you guys are just like building all this cash. What's your plan here? So I think that's a huge area where we differentiate, is just ultimately, being tied to the business owner. I'm ingrained in lots of entrepreneur groups. So I just, when we talk with our team, I actually had someone today. One of my personal pet peeves in life is formatting. I am an ADD business owner. I don't want to read emails. I hate emails. And when I get a stack like this with little dashes that aren't organized, it pisses me off so much words can't describe it. And then if you talk to any other business owner, what do you do with a long email? I don't read it. Exactly. No one wants to read long emails. So I feel like that's something we're trying to teach our team, and probably that's always going to be a constant battle, right? Like, how do you communicate this stuff? And I feel like that's another differentiator, is we try, and we're not perfect by any means to anyone listening, or if a client ever listens to this, we got a long way to go still. We're always fine tuning. But, it's like, that's what I mean by thinking like a business owner. And sometimes it can be as simple as put the goddamn action first and highlighted it in yellow and then put the supporting stuff underneath. A lot of times financial people as a whole write you this long novel, and it's like, okay, well, I'm not any clearer than I was before you sent it. So that's another thing I think is a little bit of a plague in the space.
Brian, what advice would you give to someone who's kind of in that initial maybe tailspin, mental overwhelm, a business owner who comes to you and like doesn't even know where to start? What's the first step that you would recommend to that person?
It's okay to be frustrated and upset or pissed or hate your business or love it or whatever, right? It's like, I feel like I'm a bipolar psychopath with my business still at this stage, which I probably shouldn't be. I don't know if I'll ever change. And it's hard running a business. But I feel like some of the things you can do, ultimately where to start. And it's easy to say, hey, find the right partner. Well, no shit, right? It's not easy to find the right partner that can help you, though. If not, everyone's business would be so much further ahead. I think you have to find who jives with you and who can kind of teach you. It's very important to learn to ask questions early on, because quite frankly, you need those other, maybe this is my bias here as a consultant, but one of the best things in 2025 is you can just stack on consultants now, right? Like back in the day, someone who used to teach when I was in EO Accelerator, they taught our quarterly learning days. He's like, guys, I started my first business 20 years ago. He's like, if I wanted a Brian, there was no fractional Brian. I had to go bring him on and be like, oh God, this is such a hit to payroll, right? So it's like, sometimes you have to make those investments and be strategic on those people that are bringing you on. And you have to learn to ask questions, right? Sometimes people are more bigger and famous from their social media than they actually are, right? Like you come in, like, I'm only, we get people sometimes, it's like, I'm on the small side. I'm making $900K a year. And it's like they come in with such shame, and it's like, well, shit, dude, you're still making 900 grand a year. Like, that's really good. And there's still a lot of meat on the bone, right? So it's like, I think you kind of be honest with those providers who they're willing to help. Sometimes people, maybe you are on the smaller side, but they'll still help you because they jive with you and they like you, right? Yeah. So like have those real conversations, whether it's marketing or MySpace, accounting, finance. And then I think you have to be like selective and talk to multiple people. I think a lot of times what happens too much is people just dive right in. Yep, this bookkeeper sucks. I'm going to this one. And it's like a quick, hasty switch. And, a lot of times, to be honest, and I'll be honest, this was more when we were, depending where you are in your business cycle, you got to grab revenue sometimes. And to be honest, I'm going to tangent for a second. I think one thing I would have done that would have been better for us, I started our business later in life when I was more seasoned, and we've grown slower because of it. I've been very strategic with our revenue grabs. I have made revenue grabs, absolutely, but I probably should have even grabbed more revenue, and just know, hey, this is probably going to be like a 2 or 3 year client. So I always think that's something good for people to consider, and just know you might have to grab some of that stuff to scale faster. But ultimately, have those real conversations with people, and don't always go to the first one. We try to, we're typically talking to people 2 to 3 times before we get engaged. And that's for both parties, right? Not just us, not just them. Like, we want to make sure we're good fits. It's a lot to get in that first 90-day period, onboarding and all that, to find out like, well, shit, this isn't going to work. Yeah. So I think it's be selective on who you're working with. And like a red flag for us a lot of times, and no judgment here, just being real, where I say you own your finances, and you have some of these people with the attitude of like, this bookkeeper couldn't do it, this one couldn't do it, and they're on their 4th bookkeeper or CFO, and it's like, red flag, my man. What are your issues?
Yeah, I mean, I've learned that from experience. I think you have to go through a couple to kind of figure that out, but I think both things can be true at once. You can be working with somebody who is not a good fit for you. At the same time, you weren't your best either. Yep. So you might move to somebody else who, A, is better for you, but also you learn some things along the way, so then you treat that partnership differently, and then it works a lot better because you're like, hey, I got to pay more attention. I got to be more invested. Plus, this is a level up, so everything kind of starts to jive better because I understand what this relationship should be. And that could be with any professional service, honestly, not even just financial.
Right. And then also think like you're going to outgrow people, period, end of story, right? Whatever the provider is. And then you can also, not everyone's okay working like that. Like one of my negative things I did was I used to just be psycho monthly recurring revenue. If we couldn't get you on that, I wasn't working with you, period, end of story. We do, not a lot more, but we do more project work than we used to. And sometimes it's all you really need is like as an example, I won't disclose parties or names here or anything, but just say a year plus ago, we just needed to fine tune our ops a little bit. Not my area of expertise. My number 2 is just a badass, but like, she was only a year in the company, and I felt like was still finding her voice and what she's allowed to do versus not. So we brought an extremely expensive ops consultant on, and they were worth their weight in gold. And we did not work with them a long period of time. I can't remember how many, maybe 3 months, something like that. We kind of staggered it, and it worked, right? And I would have loved to have kept them, but it didn't make sense financially. Like, it's not necessarily the budget wasn't there, but it's like, hey, you guys in a short amount of time, they were working primarily with my number 2 who just needed a little lift, and then I was secondary. Like, we got a massive ROI from them just like that. And, the next piece, yes, they could have helped us, but the ROI was just going to be a lot steadier. And no different than any other small business owners, we want to do this, we want to do that, we want to do that. So we had to kind of think like, yeah, I would have loved to continue working with them, and we'll probably work with them again at some point, but it didn't make sense at that time. So also, if you have the ability to grab people on that project side, don't be scared to, be honest with it, right? Like, hey, we view this as XYZ project. If you guys wow us, cool. Like, maybe we'll have a retainer.
Last question for you, Brian, before we let you go. What does success look like for you now, and how has that definition changed? You've been an entrepreneur and working for 20-ish years. We'll say 20-ish years.
Makes
now.
Me so old, right?
So, obviously for everybody, their definition of success when they're in their early 20s looks very different than as they, start kind of stacking up decades. What does that arc look like for you, and what are you excited about success looking like for you now?
Oh, that's such a tough question. I think success for me, I'm not going to share my targets, but I'm still extremely ambitious on what is capable from revenue and profit in the future. still want to own multiple businesses. Just to be candid, I probably don't have the skill set right now to do that. So I kind of got to get to here, and then I will own multiple businesses. I fully expect to hit those goals in the next, 3 to 5 years, and I'm aiming for the stars financially. But also, with that being said, I know other things I'm not willing to do. Like, I worked out in Aspen for 2 years, short period of time. Our group was 300 million to 2 billion, the 3 owners I worked with. I learned so many amazing things from them, and I also learned some shit I don't want to be like from them. And one of them was around money. The serial entrepreneur in the group, when I was working there, he was in his 60s. And, I'm not here to judge anyone else's life, but from my vantage point, it wasn't the life I wanted to live. I felt it was more of a hollow life around work, where I want to have more of a grounded spot between work, personal life, and family life. So, that's something I balance. And my random, I like to tangent in case you guys didn't know. My random tangent here is like, I think work-life balance is the biggest crock of shit ever.
I totally agree.
And it's like, yeah, of course, I want it too, but it's not realistic. Like, you have to know where you are financially, where you are in your business journey, where you are, if you have kids. For me, I'm just going to talk through my lens, where you are in your kids' journey, right? And it's like, there are certain times where if you're not willing to grind in your business, it is going to get stuck there, period, end of story. Just, there's no, I think that is one of the biggest myths, and it drives me insane. But with that being said, of course, I would love to have my little triangle I just described perfect. So outside those ambitious revenue goals, I know that I am also conflicting because I stop work at 5 o'clock every day. Like, just period, end of story. Now I wake up early and work, but I went deep on my personality profile and my, little custom bots about me. And I am a psycho sports parent. It's how I am wired, right? So I'm trying to raise little Division I athletes here. Absolutely. And, so that's hard to do both at the same time. So it's like, I do want to be at my kids' games. I'm kind of joking, kind of serious there.
I'm like 70% joking.
Yeah, I'm like 20% joking. You should have seen the chat I had. I was like, I sound like a psychopath writing this. And it's like, no, it's just how your brain is wired. And I'm like, all right, you're being a little too nice to me. But it's like, with that, it's like, I love youth sports. And especially for my kids, everyone has their own thing that's important. But like, to me, that's like one of the few areas you get to compete now. There's still winners and losers, even though we give too many damn participation trophies still. But like, and I think it's one of the best teachers in life. Like, I want my kids to be strong. I don't want them to be little bitches, right? So it's like, that stuff is very important to me. So I choose to take away work time so I can do that. And to me, it is well worth it. So I think success, it's a little bit of a mix. Like, I probably am going to make that. If I want to hit my goals business-wise, I'm trading some of that off because the family stuff is important to me too.
It's a holistic approach to success instead of it being just in one area of your business, your finances, your whatever. I want to find some, even if I can only get 70% success in this area and 60 in this, like, that's good because it combines all to be one, holistic picture that I can feel good about with my life. And that's what really entrepreneurship should be, feeding your life and your dreams. It shouldn't have to be the other way around necessarily.
Yeah, and ultimately I feel out of balance, right, when one of them's way tipped in a direction. Like, if I'm not doing enough personal stuff, whatever, exercising, meditating, golf, whatever it may be, right? Like, feel out of whack. Or same if you're working too much. At least that's kind of like how I view my success.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here, Brian. This was super helpful, and I think a lot of our business owner and entrepreneur audience are really going to enjoy it. Thanks so much for listening to another episode of Marketing on the Move. We'll see you next month. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Marketing on the Move. If you're looking for more ways to improve your marketing and build a scalable system to help your business grow, check out thebreezycompany.co or any of the resources linked in today's show notes.